A very good morning to you. Welcome to the West Ham Voice on Friday morning. I hope you all had a good week. Well, you should have done, because after that performance, the start of the week, the performance and the win against Newcastle United, that should have set us all up to have had a great week, shouldn't it? If this is the first time you've experienced in the West Ham Voice, first time on this channel, or if you've come back and have yet to become a subscriber, please do consider, once you've watched the video, if you enjoy the content, please do consider becoming a subscriber of the channel. And whether you are new, passing through, or an existing subscriber, please do hit the like button as well. So what are we going to do today? What are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to do a brief preview of the game coming up against Arsenal on Saturday. Now, according to Lopetegui'S pre-match press conference, there are potentially 2 or 3 players that are doubtful for the upcoming game against Arsenal this Saturday. Now, without naming the players in his pre-match conference, it's assumed that 2 of the 3 players are likely to be Jean-Claire Todibo, who came off with a knock, an injury during the game against Newcastle on Monday night. And it's been suggested that Niclas Fullkrug will be back in action. Well, the official West Ham website suggested on Thursday night that Fullkrug will be assessed before the game on Saturday. Now, as to who the third player is, I wouldn't want to guess. Looking at the game or being at the game on Monday, I didn't see anybody else come off with a knock or anything. You know, the substitutions made after the Todibo one seemed to be tactical rather than having to replace any player that was injured. And let's talk very briefly and let's reflect back on that performance on Monday night, because the win will no doubt have eased the pressure on Lopetegui. And the understanding is he's under more pressure than just about football. He did go back to Spain during the international break to visit his father, who is meant to be quite ill, and, you know, we wish him well. But managing or being a head coach of a Premier League team comes with its own stresses and strains as well. And so that win may have lifted some weight off his shoulders, but it will undoubtedly have boosted the morale of the squad as well. Look, with only half a dozen games played so far this season, questions were already being asked about, you know, whether the players were disillusioned with the Spanish head coach and whether he had lost the dressing room. There was a lot of dissent and discontent, apparently, and apparently players didn't want to play for him. Well, I think that we got the answer to quite a lot of those questions quite loud and clear on Monday night. We were together, we were compact, we were cohesive, you know, we were driven. There was a lot of good movement, a lot of good passing, really forward thinking, and a lot of passion that was showed on Monday night against Newcastle. And what we want moving forward is we desperately want to see more of that against Arsenal and every other team that we play in the remaining part of this season. I have said on many occasions that a win is always, you know, crucial. It's vital. And that's what we'd be aiming to achieve at all times. But the team performance is just as crucial, because we could win horribly and everyone would be moaning about the football, or we could lose and have played well. But, you know, that when we play well, it kind of gives us an insight into where the team is or where the squad is at. Look, if after negative games and negative results are proof to some that things are not going so well behind the scenes, then surely the positive displays and the positive wins must surely be a sign that perhaps things are not quite as bad as some mainstream and social media platforms might be suggesting. There was so much to take away from the game on Monday night. A proper team structure, like I said, proper cohesion. There was aggression in our play. There was forward thinking in our play, great passing and movement. And that's all we want to see. We want to see players play with commitment. We want to see them play with passion. We want to see them play with pride. But as Lopetegui said in his Arsenal pre-match press conference on Thursday, that game is now gone. The Newcastle game is gone, and the focus is now fully on the Arsenal game. So what of Arsenal? Last season, we beat them on their ground in a gutsy 2-0 win in December. And if you recall, that was the time when apparently David Moyes was offered his new contract at West Ham that he turned down. But less than 2 months later, in February, we were nowhere near the kind of team that we were in the away game. And as we all know, Arsenal humbled us. Well, they did more than that. They humiliated us in that 6-0 defeat at home. Now, interestingly, despite being 10 places and 7 points away from Arsenal, they're in fourth, we're in 14th. Our form over the past 5 games has actually been better than Arsenal's. They've lost 2, they've drawn 2, and they only won their first game in 5 when they beat Nottingham Forest after the international break in a 3-0 win. Whereas over the past 5 games, I'm talking about Premier League. I know they played in Champions League. Over the past 5 games for West Ham, despite not having played well in most of those games, we've lost 2, we've drawn 1, and we've won 2 games. So what do we expect from Arteta's Arsenal on Saturday? Well, one thing they will try to do, as most teams will obviously want to do, is to exploit our weaknesses. Now, up until the Newcastle game, you could argue that our weaknesses were spread across the whole pitch, defence, midfield, and attack. But on Monday, we played with new vigour. We kept a clean sheet, which was really crucial as putting our chances away. Now, if you look at Arsenal, what they did against the way they set themselves up against Nottingham Forest last weekend was that Odegaard and Saka doubled up on the right-hand side of attack, which obviously created problems for the Nottingham Forest left side of defence. Now, in the likelihood that Lopetegui will want to play the same team that he did against Newcastle this coming Saturday, that would mean that if Crescencio Somerville plays, he might find himself doing more defensive duties than he does attacking. That's because he'll have to support Emerson if Arsenal double up against West Ham on the left side again. But they've got other strengths, haven't they, Arsenal? Thomas Partey, Declan Rice, pivoting in midfield allows the Arsenal attacking players to play with a lot of freedom. Partey had a superb game in the Champions League during midweek on Tuesday when they thumped Sporting Lisbon 5-1. He basically dominated and controlled the midfield, and Arteta suggested that was probably the best midfield performance or the best performance that he had seen Partey play. So what do we have that will combat that Partey Rice pivot in midfield? Well, look, if we play the same team and if we can get the likes of Carlos Soler and Lucas Paqueta to click again, get them on the ball, then perhaps they could prove to be a challenge to that Arsenal pair because of their flair in midfield. But we may also need a little more than just flair and our passing ability to get past those 2 players. And this is perhaps where the combative Edson Alvarez might come in handy. Now, he's back from suspension. He's available on Saturday. But in my head at this moment in time, I'm just not sure whether I would start Alvarez or not. If Lopetegui wants to add some strength in the centre of the park, then he may not have a choice. But to seriously consider calling Alvarez back into the starting lineup. But at whose expense? Paqueta most definitely had one of his better games in a long time on Monday against Newcastle. Carlos Soler demonstrated just why we were so very patient in getting him on loan in the summer transfer window. And of course, Thomas Souček does what Thomas Souček does. He disrupts in midfield, but he notched up his 3rd Premier League goal of the season so far. The fact that Arteta can totally rely on Partey and Rice to control the midfield and to have someone like Odegaard operating just ahead of them means that most teams who play against them are looking at defending against 4 players. Arteta operates a very high backline, which compresses the play deeper into the opposition's half. And Arteta isn't precious about possession-based football as much as his Spanish counterpart is. It's all about fast movement. Look, don't get me wrong, when they've got the ball, they're great with the ball. But it's all about fast movement, quick passes to the front players for them to strive to do the damage. And they've got more than enough options to get their goals with Kai Havertz, Saka, Martinelli, and Trossard having scored 13 of their 21 Premier League goals so far this season. Right, enough about Arsenal. What we're more interested in is what kind of West Ham is going to turn up on Saturday. Look, if we put in anywhere near the kind of performance that we did against Newcastle on Monday night, then we're going to have a very decent game on our hands. And we could do a lot worse than take all of the best parts of the game on Monday and then look at how Bournemouth and Newcastle recently beat Arsenal in the Premier League to try and find a way of beating them. Now, I know what you're going to say immediately. Arsenal had a player sent off against Bournemouth, which is probably a factor why Bournemouth won that game. But bear with me, because it's about the tactics that both Bournemouth and Newcastle used against Arsenal, which seemed to be quite effective. They were hitting Arsenal on the break with long diagonal balls to their wide players, who were the ones that were creating the problems to Arsenal's defence. And we have similar wide players at West Ham who could do just as much damage in a counter-attacking style of football as Newcastle and Bournemouth did. Now, look, this is not to say that we've got to go and sit deep and allow Arsenal all the space to attack us, because if we do that, we know what will happen. They'll severely punish us. But if we pack out our midfield and rely a little bit less on possession-based football, but start to use our wide players in a kind of a counter-attacking style, then perhaps that's the way to overcome this Arsenal team. And we've got players. Somerville and Bowen have got pace in them. They're creative, and they can cause problems down the flanks against this Arsenal side. Now, speaking of Jared Bowen, if you're interested for your chance to win a lead-framed signed Jared Bowen shirt with custom lead frame, plus the chance to win 15 other instant West Ham prizes, visit footballprizes.co.uk for all the details, plus terms and conditions. The competition ends on Wednesday, the 6th of December at 7:30. So good luck with that if you decide to enter. Now, who we're going to have lining up against Arsenal is going to be the interesting factor. And I've suggested already sort of one or two options. So if we have an enforced change on our hands, then I could see Dinos Mavropanos replacing Todibo in defence. Now, this may not necessarily be a bad thing, because a lot of Arsenal goals this season have come from set pieces, corners, etc. Now, perhaps Mavropanos might actually be better suited to defending these kind of set pieces alongside Kilman. Kilman has got the third most headed clearances in the Premier League so far this season. And although Mavropanos hasn't played enough games to rank in the top 10 of headed clearances, his contested header win ratio is amongst the best in the Premier League. So that's maybe the enforced switch on us. And then it comes to the tactical switch that I've already mentioned. Now, on Monday night, we had a midfield three of Paqueta, Soler, and Souček, and it was superb. You know, we were forward thinking, we were passing the ball really well. It was really measured and controlled, especially Soler and Paqueta really having that sort of gel between them. Will Lopetegui go, or will he be thinking about going for a more defensive-minded central midfield against Arsenal's team? Or will he stick to what he played with on Monday? So there's the argument that you should stick to what you've got, a winning team. But there's the other argument of this is a completely different team to Newcastle, so maybe something different is required. And if he does put Alvarez in, who will he drop? Now, maybe it will be Soler, or maybe it would be Somerville. Now, neither of them deserve to be dropped, but you can possibly see Somerville being dropped, and then you're going to have to start tinkering, aren't you? Putting Soler out on the left or Paqueta out on the left, and then you haven't got that unison that you had in midfield on Monday night. Or you could drop Soler. Or you could drop Souček. My mistake. You could drop Souček and keep Soler with Paqueta in midfield with Alvarez and keep Somerville on the left and keep Bone on the right, because as I've said, you could use them as the outlets. Now, that would be a little bit harsh on Souček because he's done nothing wrong since coming back in the team over the last few weeks. Whatever Lopetegui decides, it's going to be a hard choice. I'm going to predict that we're going to get something out of this game because I predicted that against Newcastle for Monday night. Now, I said that we were going to get a 2-2 draw out of Newcastle, so I'm going to stick with the same prediction. I'm going to go for a Desmond because that might bring us a little bit of luck. And it wouldn't surprise me if the score was different. Probably a win for us. In all honesty, look, it's not going to be an easy game. It's going to be a very different game, which is why I can see potentially Lopetegui maybe having to tinker with the starting lineup in order to get something from this game. And if we didn't have enough incentive to beat Arsenal, get revenge on them from the 6-0 drubbing last season, there's another incentive that came up on Thursday that we need to be aware of. And that's, of course, Merson. Paul Merson said before the game against Newcastle on Monday that we were going to get stuffed 3-0 and that anyone that thought we could get a win was delusional. But that hasn't stopped him, hasn't it? Has it? Because despite that, he's now suggesting that Declan Rice is going to help destroy West Ham this coming weekend, and it's going to be an easy win, 3-0 to them. I hope Lopetegui takes what the comments that Merson has made into the dressing room before the game on Saturday to remind them of what everyone thinks of them, especially the pundits, when we're not given a cat in hell's chance. And I hope that, if nothing else, is incentive enough to go and get something out of this game. Right. I'm going to be at the game, obviously. As I usually do, I will bring you a post-match review as soon as I can after the game. If we score any goals, when we score goals, I'll put them up on the channel as well. So do look out for those. But like I say, if you have yet to become a subscriber of this channel, and if you've enjoyed the content, please do become a subscriber and let you know when I'm next on. And whether you're a subscriber, passing through, or an existing subscriber, please do hit the like button as well. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Let's go and give Arsenal a good game. Let's put in a good performance and see what the outcome might be. I'll see you all very soon. And come on, you Irons.